Well, Razorback fans, I would say it's a pretty Merry Christmas because Arkansas had a couple of additions from the transfer portal at the wide receiver position. One of them is really fascinating. So let's talk about it on today's Locked On Razorbacks podcast.
You are Locked On Razorbacks, your daily podcast on the Arkansas Razorbacks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into Locked On Razorbacks podcast. I am your host, John Nabors. I am also the host of Inside Arkansas Live, which you can catch every weekday starting at noon on Inside Arkansas and InsideArkansas.com. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Hope everybody had a wonderful Christmas, as this will be the last time I'm wearing my Santa hat. I feel like it's still appropriate considering it is Christmas when I'm wearing it, but by the time you're listening to it, it's the day after Christmas. It doesn't matter. It's all well and good. But still, hopefully everybody had a wonderful holiday, spending with people that you love, getting some awesome gifts, and being able to, enjoy the best time of the year, according to a lot of people. But still, a few things, though, we're going to talk about in today's podcast and really about some of the additions. We'll get to one of the other ones, too, that I'm really excited about, but also, of course, getting into a little bit of what Arkansas needs to do next in the transfer portal as we get closer and closer to the Liberty Bowl. That's still a thing that's happening on Friday night. But this was a fascinating thing that wasn't a surprise, but still unique, where Arkansas, as of yesterday, on Christmas Day, mind you, got the announcement that they added their 16th player from the transfer portal, and it was wide receiver Courtney Crutchfield, who was formerly of Missouri, but also a true freshman wide receiver. Didn't play much at all this past season for the Tigers, and technically he redshirted, so just not really a whole lot of action. So when this particular player, Courtney Crutchfield, if he would have just had these numbers and did all these things and coming into Arkansas, there probably wouldn't be a whole lot of fascination about him. In fact, a lot of people probably wouldn't even care, to be honest. But it did make a splash, about as big of a splash as any, because, let's be honest, you all know, he's from the state of Arkansas. He was the number one player coming out of the state of Arkansas just a year ago in the high school class. Originally was committed to Arkansas, but then committed to Missouri. And it was a huge get for them over at Missouri. I'll just go through a little bit of his profile just to give you an update on him. And he's 6'1", 185 pounds. He is out of Pine Bluff, Arkansas. And according to 24/7 Sports, this was what was crazy. I didn't realize this part of it until I started reading about it. Crutchfield finished as a borderline 5-star prospect in the class of 2024. So he was as close to being a 5-star prospect as you could get. He was ranked 43rd nationally overall, number 10 among wide receivers. He's also the 4th wide receiver addition, which we'll talk about some of those now that he's officially signed. So he was a guy that a lot of people were after coming out of high school and had scholarship offers pretty much to anywhere in the country he wanted to go. And this was one of those deals to where Arkansas had a need, and we all know that they need wide receivers. And again, we'll talk about one of the big ones here in the next segment. But I wanted to bring up, at least to me, about why this is so much more of an interesting story dealing with Courtney Crutchfield, is because of the state of Arkansas angle. There were some people, not all, but there were some people that came out and said that they did not care about this kid or did not want this kid. Like, hey, you said no to us once, you're dead to me, blah, blah, blah. Okay, whatever. There were some people that weren't that excited about it because he didn't really have any sort of production. He didn't really have anything to go out on. And I'll be honest, if you're a wide receiver and you're a freshman, it's always tough to see the field effectively and efficiently in the SEC whenever you are a true freshman. It doesn't matter what position you're in. It's tough. But I will say that wide receiver is normally the easier position to see action as a true freshman. Well, he didn't see any at all. So some of you are going to be like, oh, well, if he didn't have any stats, he doesn't have any numbers, why do we care about getting this kid? Why do we want him? Or the state of Arkansas angle, or whatever it is. And again, that's some, because I know a lot of you are really excited about this. I think it's always great to have kids come back to the University of Arkansas from the state of Arkansas if they're given those opportunities. Because, not every time is it just as simple as, oh, well, he told Arkansas no, and, now he wants to go over here. Yeah, I mean, that to me, that's perfectly fine. That's something that I actually appreciate and respect and enjoy seeing, because it shows that there's no burned bridges, there's no issues, there's no any sort of grudges being held. It's just the modern day of college football and college sports, whether you agree with it or not. And being able to get a guy like Courtney Crutchfield, where, again, borderline 5-star player coming out of high school. I don't care what he did or did not do at Missouri. I look at it as the potential being there, because a kid that comes out of high school and that highly regarded, there's got to be at least some element to him of being able to really pop and be able to be a really great player. I think it's about maybe having the right offense, maybe having the right situation, the right quarterback throwing you the ball. And I think that with Bobby Petrino in this offense, this might be something that really suits him. Suits him right down to the ground. Could be great for him. And I'm all about getting guys that can help. That can really help you not only be a better team, but also help in developing and help being able to cause a splash and to be able to have other people be excited about bringing you on. So I, again, do not care about what happened or what didn't happen or anything like that when it came to the recruiting of him. What I care about is, can he help you right now? Can he be a guy that comes on the campus and helps you out? I don't believe he's going to replace Andrew Armstrong. I just don't see that being the case. But I do believe that he is a guy that's, since being handpicked by Bobby Petrino, by Sam Pittman, and trying to make all of that happen, them making it happen, I think, is nothing going to be a positive. Seems like the team's excited about it too. But there's always something special when you have those in-state kids coming to Arkansas. And I also thought it was kind of interesting where, whether Sam Pittman did it intentionally or not, but I remember leading up into the Missouri game, he was asked about in the press conference, like, hey, what do you think about all these in-state kids from Arkansas being over there and playing for Missouri? And he made the joke. He's like, well, I didn't see any of them on the 2-deep. And like, yeah, they may have them, but they're not contributing anything. They're not playing or anything. So, some people may have taken that as a shot towards a Crutchfield or whoever. Who knows? Maybe he didn't even mean it. But the overall gist of what I'm trying to say in this whole thing about Courtney Crutchfield is that sometimes when it comes to the portal, you want to be able to have guys that are big-time SEC players. You want to have guys that came from SEC schools. You want to have contributors from other SEC schools. We all know that. We all understand that, and that's what we all want. But that's not always the case, too, because a lot of these kids are transferring out because they're not contributing, because they're not a part of it, because they want to go someplace different. And that's where my, I guess, excitement can lie. If this was a redshirt junior, a redshirt senior player, I think I'd feel a lot differently about it, because obviously he's gone through many years of college. And if those were the type of stats that he was having last season, then it's really hard for me to get pumped up and excited about it. But being a true freshman and now going to be a redshirt freshman and being in a particular offense and with a team that is really trying to change some things up in the wide receiver room, this can be somebody that can really develop and really just stick right in and possibly take things to another level to really help out Taylor Green, to help out the overall offense in general, and be somebody that can see the field and be that guy. I don't know. I'm really hesitant to always go at somebody and be like, dude, this is the biggest pickup ever. It's a good pickup. So don't get me wrong. It is a good pickup. But it's one of those things to where you just got to see it in place. You got to see what it looks like. You got to see what happens when it all comes together in the springtime and in spring ball and the rapport that it is building between the teams. Those are the things you really got to see and you got to witness and you got to wait for. But the wide receiver room is getting better. And that's what's most important. The wide receiver room is getting better. And as great as it may be to get Courtney Crutchfield, there's another wide receiver that Arkansas got on Christmas Eve that was a phenomenal wide receiver. And we'll talk about him in just a second. So stay with us here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. All right, all you Razorback fans, the NFL playoffs are almost here, but it's not too late to get on the regular season action with FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. Because right now, new customers can finish the season strong with $250 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. FanDuel has so many ways for you to pick up a W. I love betting on which players will score a touchdown and how many points will score for each team, and doing all that. It's just a whole lot of fun. It's a lot of thrills to be had from it as well. Not only can you bet on who will win the game, but FanDuel also has bets for which player will score a touchdown, how many points each team will score, and so much more. So just visit FanDuel.com today. That's FanDuel.com at your chance to win $250 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, so moving on into the next segment of the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. We talked about Courtney Crutchfield and the nice addition that it was for the Razorbacks because of the potential that's there, because of the in-state kid, a guy who could end up really flourishing and when he gets to that 20, 21-year-old and maturing and all that. But the thing is that you couldn't just base a lot of your success and all the stuff that you're going to be losing here in this offseason based on potential. You had to get somebody that's a bona fide dude. And there's been a few players that Arkansas has been targeting at different positions that I've been pretty excited about, or at least feeling good about. But this was one that I was really happy and really pleased with the fact that Arkansas was able to get him. And that is, of course, Omega Blake. One of the best names that could ever exist. Like O''Mega Blake. Marketing department's going to have a field day with that one. But he is a transfer out of Charlotte, a wide receiver. And a lot of you may see that, again, have a certain way, be like, oh, well, whatever. It's a guy from a small school. Well, he chose the Arkansas Razorbacks over South Carolina, which South Carolina has usually done some pretty good stuff and does as well in recruiting, and being over there in the Carolinas was really close to home. But he also chose Arkansas not only South Carolina, but also Florida State, Texas A&M, and Wisconsin. So you're talking about some pretty substantial schools that ended up getting a player like him. He's 6'2", 180, and he's actually from South Carolina, but felt like Arkansas was the place for him. And here's what's crazy about his particular game. Watch the highlights for one. I wish I could show it to you, but I'd get demonetized. I don't want that. But watch the highlights and just type in his name on YouTube and see some of the playmaking ability that he has, and you'll see exactly what I'm talking about. He had 32 receptions for 795 yards, okay? That's also 9 touchdowns, all right? So think about that. He had 32 receptions, 9 touchdowns. That's almost a third of his catches were touchdowns. And 795 yards? Folks, that's averaging 25 yards per reception. That was second in the NCAA this past year. 25 yards per reception. Now, regardless if you see his highlights, regardless of any of that, when you see that particular number of how many catches he had and how many yards to have that type of average, you know that you're dealing with a player that has some serious game-breaking ability. When he has the ball in his hands, he can make you miss. He's got some speed. He's got some athleticism. When he's down the field, he can go up and get it. He's got some serious athleticism. 6'2", 180 doesn't exactly sound like the biggest frame of guy. But again, if you watch some of the plays that he's in, he really has the ability to go up and grab it. I think his timing is great. And to me, he's kind of the quintessential type of player you want to see in a Bobby Petrino offense. Maybe I'm making a bad comparison here, but from what I saw from him, he reminds me of almost a taller Marquell Wade. I'm sure a lot of you remember old Marquell Wade. Marquell Wade was a phenomenal athlete. Wasn't that tall. He's 5'11", 6 foot. This guy's 6'2". So he does have a little bit of height. But just looking at the type of game-breaking ability that he has, I think that he can just be that player where, one, if you need somebody to go up and get it, he can be your guy. But also, two, if you just run a quick screen play or quick slant, he can be able to make players miss with that ball in his hands. Almost being the type of player that we were all hoping and thinking that Isaiah Satania could be. The type of track star athlete, the guy that has to have somebody watching him at all times because he could really break the game open and really cause some problems for you there. He's also the 110th overall prospect out of the transfer portal and the 27th wide receiver. So one of the better gets that the Razorbacks have had in this transfer portal class, for real. He also adds in from Raylan Sharp, Cam Shanks. Those are the two players that got added in. And of course, Courtney Crutchfield, as we just talked about. So it seems like your wide receiver room is really starting to take shape. As right now, you got those 4 guys. So I'd say that for sure, getting someone like Omega Blake is a number 1 type of guy. but I still like Raylan Sharp. I still like Cam Shanks. I like both of those guys as far as just being good complementary pieces. Courtney Crutchfield, I do like the idea of him. It's just a matter of, we haven't seen much of him in the SEC side of things. Can he take that next step? That's what we got to wait and see on. But that there's that. And then, as far as the guys that are returning, you still technically have Bryce Stevens, who could come back next year, I believe. Yeah, you have Bryce Stevens coming back next year, assuming they didn't go into the portal. Jordan Anthony, which I thought that he was going to be off the team because he was not listed on the roster for the Liberty Bowl, but apparently he's dealing with some family issues, is what Sam Pittman talked about. So you got him. C.J. Brown, I know they've been high on. Some people talk about Cross Johnson, maybe. You got some true freshman guys, Jacaden Ferguson, the things like that. So the point is, I believe that the wide receiver room is solid. Is it as good as what it was this past year? I don't think so, because you don't have, at least not now, but you don't have that Andrew Armstrong type of player. Andrew Armstrong's an NFL wide receiver. I don't know if any of these guys are. But did you at least get some guys that were, could you get somebody that's a better than an Isaiah Satania, better than a Tyrone Broden, better than an Isaac Tesla? I think you can. I think you do. I think you have that type of thing where you have a big group. But what's also crazy about it, though, is, we always see these wide receiver groups be put together and molded a certain way, and seeing how their size is always something. We see a 6'5" guy or a 6'3" guy. Folks, this year you're not going to have, at least not right now. These players that you're bringing in are smaller wide receivers. The fact that Omega Blake is the biggest wide receiver they're bringing in at 6'2" is saying something. I mean, Shanks and Sharp are 5'8", 5'9". Crutchfield's right at 6 foot, 6'1" maybe. So you're downsizing in the height department, which make some of you feel a certain way, or be like, hey, we need some height out there, which they have some other guys too that are going to be returning from the team that has some height too. So I'm not trying to make it sound like it's just a bunch of little people out there. But my point is that you got so used to over the past few years, and really since Sam Pittman's been at Arkansas, having tall wide receivers. Traylon Burks was a tall wide receiver. Trey Knox was a tall wide receiver. Matt Landers, tall wide receiver. And, you always had tall guys, which was fine. That was great. But as we always know, though, with those Bobby Petrino offenses, I hate to keep making the comparisons to those 2010, 2011 teams, but that's all we really have to go on as far as direct correlations. But if you remember correctly, like Greg Childs was a big wide receiver, but Jarius Wright was only 5'11". Joe Adams was only 5'11", 6 foot. Kobe Hamilton was bigger at 6'2". Marquell Wade was a smaller guy. Julian Horton, Javonte Hurton, smaller guys. So those types of wide receivers that Petrino loved having in his system, yeah, there was one or two guys that were tall, but a lot of them were just guys not as tall as me or you. So I'm curious to see how that's going to do the overhaul changing, because that's another thing you got to remember. This past year, what Bobby Petrino was able to walk into, and of course get his wide receiver coach there, get his running backs coach there, that was great. And they added some pieces that they wanted, like Taylon Green was somebody that Petrino wanted. But the wide receiver group, folks, there was nobody from Petrino's side of stuff except for Jordan Anthony. He was the only one. The rest of them were just, hey, you got to keep them because these were Kendall Briles guys or Dan Enos's guys or whoever. You just had to keep them. And so now it's going to be interesting to see how that works, how Taylon Green is able to grow with these guys, and maybe not have it as much of just a height deal. It's more about, the playmaking, the route running, which is always huge for a Bobby Petrino offense. You got to know how to run those routes, and you got to run them crisp. So these are the things that's going to be really interesting. I'm excited about the wide receiver room. I really am. I'm excited about the potential there. There's other position groups that they still need to work on. As I mentioned before, I'm excited about the defensive backs. I think the secondary, they've done a really good job in recruiting there. But there is one particular position that they have struggled a little bit with. And we're going to talk about which that is, and also hear from Sam Pittman in just a second. So stay with us here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. All right, folks, I'm here to tell you about Game Time and the Game Time app. We know that we're always looking for tickets. Some of you are going to be going to the Liberty Bowl here. I guess, geez, it's tomorrow. Holy crap, it's tomorrow. Wow. Yeah, tomorrow is the game. So it snuck up on us all. But there's not just that, but there's the Liberty Bowl. There may be some other bowl games out there. Maybe some NFL games out there. There may be some college basketball, some NBA games. It doesn't matter what it is. You got to get tickets to these games. And there's only one place to get those tickets, and it's the Game Time app. The Game Time has a curation that makes it easy to save more on all these different events. And it's not just for sports, but it's for concerts, it's for comedy shows, it's for theater shows. And you also have the all-in pricing feature to where you don't have to worry about all those extra fees when you go step by step. You can toggle the setting and boom, the price you see is what the price it's going to be, taxes, fees, and everything. So there's no surprise fees when you check out. You also get a panoramic view of your seat in the app before you buy. And also they have the lowest price guarantee. So if you find any other place where the price of that ticket is lower, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It's that simple. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, so final segment here on the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Transfer portal needs obviously need to continue to be addressed. Sam Pittman, we got a chance to hear from him in a press conference leading up into the Liberty Bowl. This was actually on Monday, so December 23rd, Festivus. But there was, some interesting things there. But what was funny, if you go back and watch on Inside Arkansas the entire press conference, nobody cared about the game or even asked about the game because that's not where people's mindset's at. It's at the transfer portal. But either way, Sam Pittman was asked about the portal and addressing some needs and where they need to go. And here's what he had to say on Monday's press conference.
Maybe just expound a little bit more on that in the portal.
I'm gonna move this over here and look at it a little bit because there's several here. If you look at offensively, I think we've really enhanced our team in the portal with O-linemen. That was a key. We still have another one we need to get, but we've had 4 there. We've got a running back, Braylon Russell's. He's going to play. He's here, and so that's been back and forth there, but we're glad to have him. 3 wide receivers to this point and a tight end. I still think we need to add to that tight end group and add to the offensive line. We need another tackle, I think. And then defensively, I think Deke's really done a nice job with adding 3 D linemen, a couple of rush ends and an interior. And then we've added 2 corners, a safety and a hog. Probably need to get another safety and possibly another corner out of the portal. I still think, Trey, that we're still probably somewhere between 4 and 6 additions out of the portal. And we'll take our time there. We have done pretty well coming out of the portal in April. We've hit in the April portal as well. So I do want to save a scholarship or 2, but as you well know, the portal opens, so people are going to leave. So I don't want to save too many because I think obviously if someone's not playing at the end of spring ball, we'll probably have a scholarship available to go in the portal.
So that was Sam Pittman talking about all the needs, and of course he addressed a few of them, and pretty much all of them are still a need. And I agree with him in the regards of, hey, they did a good job of getting some of the players that they really needed and addressing a lot of these needs and everything. But here's the thing: I talked about the offensive and defensive line last week, and how to me you have to be able to have elite level linemen. Those should be the things that you always overpay for. That you got to be able to build depth. You got to be able to have dudes out there. And I think they've done a pretty good job on the offensive line. I really do. They want to continue to bring in more tackles, which I think is funny because I feel like they have all those positions taken care of. But they've worked through it. They've gotten a bona fide starting center. They've gotten a bona fide starting tackle. They've gotten some guys that could really step in and be some major players there. Guys that are young, but like Jaquan McCrory, he could be one of those guys that steps up big and maybe takes a huge step forward. So I like what they've done there. But here's the deal. They've added D linemen. Ken Talley, for instance, is an edge rusher from Michigan State. They added a guy like, his name just escaped me. I have to look at it. Oh, yeah, Justice Boone, sorry, from Florida Gators. I remember he's from Florida. But Justin Boone, the edge rusher out from the Florida Gators. They've added him into the mix and being a part of it. So they've added a couple of guys. David Oak as well from the defensive tackle transfer there, who was I also think that David Oak was somebody that may have been undervalued, but he's from Abilene Christian and also 6'2", 290. My point is this. I think you've done a good job in the offensive line. There's nothing against these three guys, but that's not enough for me. I mean, folks, you're losing Landon Jackson, who's going to be drafted in the NFL. Some people are saying like, oh, Landon Jackson didn't do that much this year. Folks, yes, he did. He did. And the times that he didn't is probably because he was double teamed a lot of cases. Go back and watch the film. Landon Jackson's a phenomenal player. And that's why the NFL is going to draft him, because he's really good. So you don't have him. You don't have Nico Davier anymore. He has transferred out. You have some other guys that you're losing. And Eric Gregory, he's going. So you're losing a lot of production there. You've lost production in other places too. But at the wide receiver position, as we just talked about, I think you've done a good job of replacing that. Secondary, I think you've done a good job replacing that. Offensive line, I think you've done a good job replacing that. But the defensive line is a little bit worrisome for me because you just don't have enough guys that I feel like you can count on. I think you can get by, too, with having some of these project players or some of these players that you're going to have to work with and develop and all of that. That's great. But D-line, you got to have dudes. And I think that them missing out on that kid from Georgia, the transfer from Georgia, was huge. He went to USC. I think that if they would have gotten him, that at least would have made a huge impact, a huge difference. But that needs to be the number one priority, number one next step. Get defensive linemen in here. You got to get them because you cannot be left out hanging out to dry with bad trench play. You can't do it. So that's where I want to see their direction. But as Sam Pittman said, they got more work to do. And who knows, maybe in the springtime they'll even bring some in. But we'll have to wait and see until that happens. But appreciate each and every one of you listening in and watching into the Locked On Razorbacks podcast. Be sure to subscribe to the Locked On Razorbacks podcast on iTunes or on Google Play or wherever you find your podcast. You can also get after me on Twitter at John Nabors Show for any questions, comments, concerns that you may have. We'll keep it going from there. Same podcast time, same podcast channel tomorrow afternoon. Have a great rest of your day, everybody. See you then.